So, Petra here at Being of the Earth. I'm here today with my friend and colleague Aline, who is a long-standing friend through movement medicine and with whom I've been having some really beautiful conversations about the connections between our different bodies of work, the questions, the challenges, the perspectives that we share and the differences between the modalities. And because we've been talking a lot about these kind of things over the last few months, really, we decided today to record this conversation and see if there's anything useful that might emerge for other people as well. And we hope that there's something of interest, something that sparks some inspiration, something that makes you more curious about movement, the body, in your own life. So I'm just going to ask Ilian to introduce herself and say a little bit about what she does and whatever else is important to know.
Yeah, lovely. It's really nice to share this time together, and thank you for organizing it and hosting this. So I've really been dancing pretty much since I was a little girl. And for me, it's always been this way of discovering about life. And so I danced in nature before I had any formal training. And then I went to the local ballet school as a 7-year-old and I learned pliés and all these kind of ballet movements. But I very quickly brought these into nature as well. So I was doing the ballet movements and then dancing to the stars and then kind of picking flowers and sharing them with the audience, that sense. So I had a strong training then in classical and later contemporary dance. And at some point, I just felt there was such a separation between learning to become a professional dancer and actually dancing with people. So that sense that we have in the West that you need to be trained this or that in order to be able to do it. Like, I don't know, so many people say, oh, I can't paint or I can't sing or I can't dance. And for me, that's such a loss that we think that only the professionals can do that. So actually, I quit my professional dance training and I started to dance with people and to really feel that sense of like, how can we remember what it is to move the body and to bring that joy back? And I really believe that movement is our first way of knowing. So even in the womb, we're moving. And then as babies, we learn about the world through movement. So I think that is one of the commonalities between our work, that curiosity of like, what is movement as a modality, as a way of exploring, as a way of expressing. So I can explain more as we go, but I think that's a good setting the scene for our talk.
You just want to quickly say a bit about the different modalities of movement that you offer in your work so that people also know that there is
Sure.
this aspect of the movement medicine training that we've both done, and having been part of that community over many years and dancing together in that way. And I know then there's also some differences in terms of where you've gone with other modalities. So maybe you could just...
Sure. Yeah. So that's the kind of shamanic dance, the free conscious dance. People probably know the word. And I've combined that much with stories and archetypes. So for me, bringing the world of mythology and the world of dance together. So to dance your own story and to dance collective stories as well. So that is what I call story dance and ritual at the moment. That work might still evolve for that word. And then on the other hand, I also teach Qigong, and that is a Chinese meditative movement practice. It's not as well known as yoga, but it has similarities, although in my understanding, it emphasizes flow a lot more. So where yoga is often focusing on postures, Qigong, it consists of repetitive movements that sort of help you get into a zone using the breath and the cycles of release and activation. And then there's a lot of ways you can bring the body in motion with that. And that is a very structured approach to movement, which we'll talk about a bit later in our conversation.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I guess we sort of talked about the way these movement practices are a form of inquiry, a way of understanding ourselves better, a way of exploring who we are, of exploring our relationship with other people, with the world, and so on. So maybe that's where we can start in this conversation again, and touch a bit about on what kind of movement practices is and what it's not, because I think that's where we had an interesting conversation last time, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really big topic. I'm just wondering how we can sort of enter that landscape in a way. Um, and I think the first thing is to really acknowledge the power of our mind. We are in the West, we're so trained to develop our cognition that pretty much a lot what is happening below our head, we have very little awareness of. So I think for me, movement is definitely not a way to bypass the mind, but it is to kind of increase our awareness that we are more than mind. And we can use the strength of our awareness to really come home in our body and then move the body around in space. And like, I think we can do a very easy experiment also for people who are watching this. Like if you put out your hand like this and you just feel into what that gesture means to you. Just feel the open hand. Might something be landing on it or something blowing away from it. And then change your hand posture to kind of as if you're leaning against something or pushing against something. So just that shift in your posture, it's just a very simple change. So what do you feel here? And really bring your awareness from your head through your shoulder into your arm, into that hand, and what that energetically does. You're in a way saying, well, feeling a boundary or saying perhaps no. So this could be a yes, please, and no, thank you. Or, hey, what's happening here? Not so sure about that. So those kind of things, like how can we, I call it calibrate the body. How can we learn the language of our body again? And then, so that's a first start to start using movement as a tool for inquiry.
Thank you. That's a really powerful exploration, this, because as I was doing it, I was thinking it's like we make all these movements and take up all these postures with our body all the time, right? We are always communicating with the body, but we're not always conscious of doing that. So there's a possibility of using that, like, so if we want to say no, we might do that, but we might do that spontaneously. But if we're practicing, oh, I find it really hard to say no, we can use that practice of finding the postures of our body and exploring how that feels, and maybe strengthening that capacity to inhabit that posture more fully, to not go, oh, no, but to go, no.
Yes,
But
exactly.
that's a process of learning how to change this this habitual language of the body, because we all have habits of holding ourselves based on our stories, based on our families, based on our cultures. And so some things might be easier for us than others. So for some people, the no is very easy and the yes is very hard. And for some people, it's the other way around. And sometimes we don't have this sort of like, we want to say no, and maybe we say no with our words, but with our body, we're saying something different. And then the other person gets a very different message, right? And so how can we find that congruence between the words we speak and the way we move and hold our body in the moment?
Yeah.
Because the other person's nervous system, the other person's eyes, the other person's body picks up on the body more than they pick up on the words, right? I think it's about like, 80% of what we communicate with the body, not with the words.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing? And we place so much importance on language and expression, verbal expression. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of how we can, teach. No, I want to say train our body, but that becomes like, oh, we have to train another thing to learn, but kind of like more remember what it is, this language of the body. I think it's really good to work with those pairs of apparent opposites. And I think another way to really start is if you feel a very strong emotion. And like, for example, a lot of people feel not so very self-confident. So if you feel like, what would be a posture like, okay, I feel shy, I feel I'm not quite sure of myself, it's hard to make eye contact, just feel into any emotion that you might experience on a regular basis, and really let your body take on that posture of that emotion. And then just imagine with your head, with your mind, what the opposite would feel like. So if I feel confident, my chin lifts, my eyes open, I'm straighter, I'm taller, I can relax in my backbone. There might even be a smile, who knows? And again, to kind of go in like the lungs collapse, the shoulders come forward. And then the opening again, and then just move between those. And then often that is a start that really starts where someone is at, where you're at in this moment, and inviting yourself in, what would be another possibility? And then so once you start training that muscle, it becomes easier to then flow and kind of be surprised what else might be possible. Yes, I think we were talking earlier about how to remember these skills that we all have in the body.
Yeah, and I think there's an important thing that you touched on there, that when we are in one of those postures, whether it's the shy, not so sure, kind of withdrawn, or in the like very confident, depending on which place we're in, we move differently through the world. I mean, this is where it goes into movement, and from a posture of like, how do I walk when I'm walking with that same energy, or how do I look at the world from that place? What does the world look like when I'm doing this? Probably a bit scary, a bit intimidating, maybe very judgy. Whereas if I'm standing like this, if I'm walking like this, my chin up, my eyes out, my chest open, I probably have a very different understanding and a very different feeling of my relationship with other people around me, the world at large, my environment, my place in that environment. And so we can experiment with seeing, when I shift just a tiny bit, what happens?
Yeah.
I feel different. The world looks different. I have a different story about my relationship. And so it's a really beautiful tool to see how we can change perhaps some very powerful stories that we've been living by of, I'm this kind of person, I'm not that kind of person, I'm a shy person, I'm not a confident person, or whatever the story might be.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it might be sometimes what really helps for me is to also shift this. We talk about movement, but shift this in space. So then you say, okay, this is my always angry person. I'm so angry at the world. And then you step into that and you really allow yourself to move that anger and that frustration and that bitterness, perhaps. And then you step out of that literally into a different space in the room. And then, wow, what would be the opposite of this feeling that I know so well, that I recognize so deep in all my cells? What would be a different possibility? It doesn't have to be an opposite, but it can be a different possibility. And then again, how does that let the body, how does that, sorry, is that expressed in the body and through the body? And how does that make you feel? And perhaps then also ask yourself what is necessary to move from one to another. Like maybe there is so much anger that it's hard to let go of just yet. And you can't, and then it would be a sort of bypass and go like, oh, well, now I have to be happy clappy and I can't be angry. No, that's not at all what's the case. It's like, so what does the body and the heart and the mind need to transform this into something constructive? So that is also something we can ask of the body, like, show me what you need, what we need as a body, heart, mind being, to kind of transform this into something that's kinder to ourselves and to our environment, that's perhaps a bit more constructive, or not so tight or demanding, or
Yeah, it reminds me also of another thing that I think we spoke about recently, is this this movement is not like, oh, we do the movement to fix something, or we do the movement to arrive somewhere, but it's like in the process things happen and we can't predict them always. So like this example that you gave with the emotions, if we allow ourselves to say like, yeah, there is a lot of anger, how does it move? How can I bring that energy of the anger into movement so it doesn't sit stuck in my chest or in my belly or in my head? Then in the process of doing that. It might not be that I'm not angry anymore at the situation, but the anger doesn't have the same hold on me. It doesn't tighten me. It doesn't make me rigid. The anger has a movement. And as soon as I can include the anger and say, like, yes, there's anger here, and I can make the movements that anger makes, then the energy transforms into something else. But the goal is not like, oh, I'm going to do this so then the anger leaves. It's just like, I want to know what this anger needs from me. I want to understand it a little bit better. And then I might notice that if I give it the space, the anger feels different. And maybe then some sadness comes in, or maybe then some joy comes in, or maybe then some clarity comes in around the boundaries I need to set, or the no's that I need to say, or the what does it mean in terms of this relationship between me and the person or the situation of that angry act.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So I think in a way we can be bolder in trusting that body movement.
Mm.
You know, like whenever we're feeling stuck with something, or whenever we really recognize, oh yeah, I've been here before. This is a very familiar experience. To kind of then, okay, how can I ask my body for insight around this situation, this habit, this repetitive thought, whatever it is that you recognize.
Mm.
And then to just, a bit like you say, like without expecting a result or a solution or a cure, but just like it's a tool, movement as a tool for discovery, for expression, for giving space to. And I really love how you talk about the kind of, in a way, giving. I can't even remember how you said, but the giving voice to the anger, letting the anger speak, letting the anger do what I. You had a really beautiful expression, which I
I have to
can't
rewind.
exactly. I can't recall right now.
Yeah.
That was very
What does the
beautiful.
anger need from me? I think I said.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that you have a relationship with.
Mm.
It's not something that has a hold over you.
Mm.
And it's not all of who you are either. But it's that, what does it need from me? It shifts so much your inner experience.
And I think this is the thing, this shifting of the inner experience. So, because we were talking about, it's not like getting to an end point or to a result or fixing something. For me, there's something about when, whether we call it healing or understanding ourselves better, it happens in the process. It's not like I'm getting to when this process is complete, then I'm healed. It's more like the healing is in the exploration, in the process, right?
Yeah, yeah, beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. So I'm aware that sometimes people say, well, but I don't feel anything in my body, or like, how do I know what I'm feeling or what it is or what I need to do with it? And you touched on it a little bit with this expression of calibrating the movement, and with this exploration of posture and, how does it feel? And I guess one of the things that I often think of is that we do actually have a knowledge of what different feelings in the body mean, but we don't think of it. So, if I say to you, are you hungry or not? You know how that feels in the body to be hungry or thirsty or tired. If I say to you, how does it feel to be tired? You can probably describe to me some of the things that in your body feel like tiredness, right? Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
and in the same way, I could ask you a question. I could say, is your name Mary? That will have a particular feeling in the body if I say that. Whereas if I say, is your name Elena? It will have a different feeling in your body.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's, in a way, it's learning to recognize the signals in our body. And even because when you ask me if my name is Mary, I kind of go like, my first response was, well, I didn't think so. No, that can't be right. No. So there is a confusion. There isn't an immediate no, but there might be. There's like, no, my name, no. It takes a little time to filter through all the systems of the body. And sometimes there is a, no, that's so clear. It's a no. And I'm playing here because, of
Yeah.
course, I know my name isn't Mary, but you can
Yeah.
sense that, there is a no or a hesitation or, yeah, so an exploration and a translation, I guess, between the signals from within the body and then how the minds interprets it.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, and you touched on something important there. I think that it takes time, right? It's not something that's like this all the time, listening to
yeah,
our body or hearing the signals. It actually requires us to slow down, and maybe sometimes we have to ask the same question or do the same exploration several times before we really get a feel for what it is that's coming in response from our body. And it's not a button that we push, and particularly since
yeah,
we've neglected our body and our connection with the wisdom of our body so much, and since we live in a culture that really divorces us from connection with the body in all but a kind of superficial way, it takes some time. And it takes, actually, for me, I think I could say it's taken many years to understand a bit more. And I think, I'm sure you would agree, we're not at the end of it. It's a lifelong journey, and it changes, but it really requires to slow down to get away from this, like, okay, I'm going to do this to my body and then my body must respond and give me the answer, to a much more gradual, yeah, like we said before, like it's a process. It's not a here's the question, there's the answer kind of thing.
yeah, it's kind of an arriving. Yeah. And sometimes I think this is also material for another conversation about healing as well. Like sometimes you know that the healing is done. There is such a sense of release or relief, or I've done those kind of danced healing spaces where at the end of my dance, I couldn't remember what the question was about. It was so done.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, there are things I've revisited year after year. And oh, there it is again. There it is again. Oh man, I really thought I'd done that, or I healed that, or I integrated that. Oh, okay, there's more, there's another layer, there's another step, there's another insight to be learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, like you said, we're in a in a society that likes quick fixes. And in a way, the body asks us to slow down. Yeah.
Yeah, the mind kind of goes ahead and the body sort of
Yeah.
quite a few steps
Lagging behind.
behind.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, so maybe we can invite the mind also to slow down to body time
Mm.
so that they can move forward together or backward or sideways or
Yeah. And I think it's also important there to say that, as you, I think, mentioned at the beginning, it's not like we're going, oh, the mind is bad, we must get rid of the mind. It's like we want to bring the body, the heart, and the mind together to have a more holistic
exactly.
kind of knowledge, a more comprehensive way of knowing, that it's not just a thinking knowing, but it's a feeling knowing, it's an embodied knowing. Because in a way, they're not really separate at all either. We can't really think without having a body, because a lot of what we think comes from the information that our nervous system is processing, and the nervous system is so deeply integrated in the body. You can't really say this is pure thought and this is pure body experience and this is feeling. They're all sort of interwoven and enmeshed together, and we've just made it into this thing of, like, we're thinking with the brain, we're feeling with the heart, and then there's the body, whatever the body does.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we can speak more of an awareness, and that awareness we tune to, like almost like a lighthouse, or like we tune to the mind, or we tune to the heart, or we tune to the body, and then we just really bring the awareness into these different parts of ourselves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have
Yeah.
any examples that you could share of, as you said at the beginning, you've been doing this movement-based exploration of yourself and of life for a long time. And through the shared journey that we've had with movement medicine, I think we both have an understanding of a little bit of what the other has experienced and what may have changed. But I'm curious whether you can give some examples of, how having this movement practice and how having these tools for exploration through the body have helped you in your life, have changed things in your life, how you're different now from maybe before you started to work with these tools and practices?
Well, that's a very big question. I was thinking of like a concrete example to start with. I finished my PhD in 2013, and then I had my first postdoc at a medical center in one of the UK universities. And I was really thrilled to have that because it was a university of standing. And with my anthropology and with my dance background, I was, I got into this medical institution, and it was very, well, for me, very linear and very sharp and very, in a way, quantitative and regular and square. And then that contract was a year and a half. And then later I got a job at the Center for Dance Research in Coventry, which was like, it was like, I don't know, Christmas come early. It was a creative center. It was doing research about dance, about the body. And so in a way that was like very circular and fluid and spirally. But I didn't feel quite at ease right at the start because I came then from that much squarer environment, if you like. So we had a dance studio under the Center for Dance Research where we could bring our bodies in motion, which was wonderful. And so I remember it took me a few, well, probably 6 to 8 weeks of regular movement with that sense of squareness and linearity and circles and spirals. And like we talked about earlier, it was a sense of being in the one modality and then being in the other modality. And actually, I realized neither of them was satisfying on their own. So the squareness was kind of suffocating, was a bit like you were boxed in. It was not quite in a prison, but there wasn't so much creativity. And, you had to think inside the box. Whereas the other was a lot of freedom and a lot of space. So that was easy to spin out in a way and to have not enough ground and to have always motion. And so that was a really clear example for me of like, okay, so through movement, I could understand better how these jobs were so different, how these environments were so different, and that neither held the truth, but that it was in a way my responsibility to harvest the gems of both. So that sometimes square and box is great, and sometimes spiraling circles is great, but not all the time either or. Yeah. So I think that was one really clear example where I moved with a sense of discomfort or lack of clarity or lack of belonging, or didn't quite feel at home yet, or not quite rooted. How could movement help me understand? And I think the other part of your question, I'm not sure, because you asked how it changed my life before and after, and I can't really imagine or remember a time before moving, really. I remember when I first started conscious dance, so that was when I was 27. So that was after my whole ballet and contemporary dance training. Now, contemporary dance is already very grounded and stuff, but ballet is very etherical and upward and, vertical rather than horizontal. So I remember learning the new language of conscious dance that felt much more tribal and much more horizontal and much more down rather than up. So I don't know, that was just a shift in my dance experience. But because I've really been dancing since I was 7, I can hardly remember a before.
Yeah. But I imagine also, I mean, in the way you describe the ballet and from what I know about ballet and other forms of dance that are more about performance, really, it's very much about looking at the body, right? Like, what does the body look like in space? There's an aesthetic to it. This is what a particular movement in ballet should look like a pirouette or a arabesque or whatever. And I guess the kind of dance that we're both, or the kind of movement work that we're both engaged in now, turns that around, right? And it's from the inside out. It's like, how does the body feel? How does the body have impulses to move? How does the body respond maybe to the stimulus of the music, or maybe to other people in the space, to the space itself, to a thought, to an invitation, rather than what does the body look like. So often,
Absolutely.
when we've been in spaces, moving medicine spaces, if someone who didn't know what we were doing came in and saw this group of people, they wouldn't think it's a dance, right? Because people are moving in all sorts of ways that we don't normally call dance, because it's not steps, it's not choreography, it's not about looking good, it's not about, having a straight back and that kind of energy. It's about really being true to what's happening in the moment for each person. And so sometimes it might look like crawling on the floor, it might look like standing still and it looks like there's not much movement at all, but maybe the movement is really happening on the inside. Maybe the movement is very repetitive, or maybe it's very, minute. Maybe I'm just feeling how my finger is in the air. And we always have this joke of like it's a whole bunch of people dancing like trees, pretending to be trees or pretending to be water, or it can look funny if you're not part of it. From the outside it might look funny or it might look strange, but when you're in it, it's enlivening. It's enlivening, not always in this big kind of lots of energy, but in the feeling sense of I'm alive, I'm in touch with something, I'm in touch with some texture of myself, of my soul, of my spirit, of my being, that I'm not in touch with in the day to day, when I'm just kind of going through whatever I'm
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, and I think that touches also on something we spoke about earlier. I'm hearing the playfulness also in your words, and also the freedom, as in like it doesn't need to look anything like specific anything. It doesn't need to be the same as the person next to you. It doesn't need to be as high or as fast or as far or whatever as someone else. And I think we spoke about that difference between structure and freedom. Because even when you say, oh, they're all looking like trees, so then there might be a movement invitation to move like trees, but you still have a whole forest of different trees,
Yeah.
And that's actually an invitation I do to most of my participants, like go outside and be with a tree. And then, first, you can dance close by the tree, and you can ask the tree, like, can I dance with you? Would you dance with me? And with that body sense, there might be a yes or there might be a no. And then you think, okay, I'll leave it. The tree needs some space. I'll come back another time. But most often I find the natural world is really eager to dance and play with us. And then to kind of take a next step is like, okay, so how would it be to embody this particular tree? And if you start looking at the different tree species, like there are so many different tree expressions. So even if the movement invitation is, feel your roots, feel your trunk, feel your branches, and you do that with 30 people in a space, they're all different trees. So that sense of invitation and structure and freedom on the other hand, I think that's also a sort of sliding scale we can really play with.
Yeah, and you started talking about that a little bit when you were talking about your experience at the university with the box job and then the free flowing job, and that neither one on its own was enough or felt satisfying, that we needed both. And I think that's kind of this thing of freedom and structure, that we do need both. And that in some population groups there might be an aversion to structure. In some other groups there might be an aversion to freedom. I mean, freedom can be as scary as structure, right? Structure can feel like, oh, structure, it's imposing something, it's limiting me. But freedom can also feel like, oh my God, there's so many choices, I don't know what to do, and I'm gonna be paralyzed by like, oh, like I'm free to do. We're not used to being free to do, right? We're used to being told what to do. So I think there's a nice exploration there of that. What's the dynamic between the two? How can I find freedom in the structure, like you just illustrated with the tree example, within the structure of, imagine you're moving like a tree, there's a lot of freedom. But without that invitation, that freedom would be meaningless, because then there's nothing that holds it.
Yeah.
And then at other times, structure can feel like, okay, I need to go out of the structure of habit, out of the structure of my routine, out of the structure of
Mm.
how our culture thinks I should move or what I should be or who I should be, how I should relate, and explore. If I have the freedom to do it differently, which I'm not used to, what happens?
Yeah.
What creativity emerges? What are the longings of my heart that are not satisfied by the structure? Like you were sharing in this job that was in some ways a great job in academia. There were parts of you that weren't fulfilled because, there was the part that was doing this and it was research and it was interesting. And then there was another yearning for, as you were demonstrating, the more fluid, free expression.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's not so much about, yeah, I'm wondering how to phrase it when you say like sometimes the freedom can be scary, sometimes the structure can be scary. I think we can ask ourselves what our zone of comfort or familiarity is. Like, where do we hang out most?
Mm-hmm.
Do we feel most at ease with one or the other? And then to see the other, the opposite or the other, as an invitation to just dip your toe in for a little bit and see, oh, how does that feel? And again, like maybe even with those places in the room, in the familiarity of structure, if that might be your familiarity, how does it feel to momentarily step into freedom? And like you say, oh, what if I could do anything, anything at all? How does that feel? And then also without judgment to really step into, well, actually, I'm really scared. I feel I'm shrinking a little bit because it's really overwhelming that I can do whatever I want. Ah, okay. And again, ask the body what is needed to explore freedom without freezing because it's too overwhelming, just exploring a little bit, like a teaspoon of freedom. Or maybe for you, it's the other way around. How is it? And I do notice often in the free dance, kind of the more conscious dance classes, like a real resistance to structure.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're coming to be free here. We have so much structure in our life. We don't want to be told to step right and step left and step right, step left.
But isn't it, it's also funny as you're saying that, I'm thinking that we often have a particular idea of what structure is or what it looks like, right? Because the music, for example, is also structured as a rhythm
True,
that provides a
true.
structure. And so, in movement medicine, we often work with the rhythm as well as a structure to lean into, right? To rest into the
Yeah,
rhythm and to let the rhythm carry us or play the body or,
yeah,
and we've done it with voice work and body work together to find that rhythm, which then connects us to each other. And of course, the body itself is also a mixture of freedom and structure, right? If we were just freedom, we'd be a puddle on the floor because there's no skeleton. And if we were just skeleton, there would also be something missing in terms of space and breath and fluidity. So in and
yeah.
of itself, the two already go together. And I think, yes, there is a sort of aversion to being told what to do because perhaps in many of our lives we feel there's too much of being told what to do or how to do it. And then the opposite can also be true. It's very scary when you don't know what it is that you should do,
Yeah,
depending on the culture you've grown up with, whether it's much more of a hierarchical structured system or much more of a free space, that can shape how you respond to these invitations.
exactly. And I think also in terms of exploring that structure as an invitation, I think the Qigong classes work really well because it's not like Tai Chi where you have to learn a really long routine, which can be a challenge in its own at home. It's like 15 or 20 or 30 movements, one after another, and you only do one and you flow into the next. But with Qigong, you repeat one simple movement 7 or 9 or 20 times, however the class develops. And so first you learn the movement, you learn the mechanics of the movement, you learn the breath pattern with the movement. So often it's an in and an out breath. And then often there is a natural image or an invitation to even work with an element. Even the Chinese structure also work with 5 slightly different elements to the Western system. So you can call on the power of water in one movement and let the fountain flow through you. So you learn the movement, you learn the breath, and you invite that sense of water flowing through you. And then so you start repeating that, and you can really let go, because I think that's one of the things of dancing. Like, what is the next dance movement supposed to be? And if you're not like so used to moving freely, it's easy to do bum bum bum, oh, da, da, and it becomes kind of an outer movement, outer led rather than from within. But with the repetitive invitation of that simple movement, you don't have to think about your next movement, you just let it come, and you can really surrender to that structure. And you're still free because you are moving your arms and you stretching them as wide as you want, and you breathe as deep as you want. But I think that is one of the quickest ways I've learned to come into a flow state, because the mind has something to do. It is not too demanding on the body. So then you can really follow and fall into the present moment. So I think that is one of the big gifts from Qigong, that you get into that, well, sometimes ecstatic state with a very simple movement.
Yeah, it's kind of reminding me of the magic of repetition, right? Even in
Yeah,
medicine work, there is this invitation to find a small gesture that's
yeah,
repetitive so that we can then let go of going, okay, and from there, where am I going? We're just resting in the repetition. And then, as you say, then it becomes almost a trance state, but trance very different from maybe how we associate it in our culture with like a out there trance, but a real like presence and a possibility, because we're resting in the structure of the repetition, to let other parts of ourselves open and come to the fore, and to feel more, to sense more, to have a different experience of ourselves. And I guess that's what you're referring to when you say it's almost ecstatic, right? It's not ecstatic as always like a high energy. It can be just ecstatic in terms of a different consciousness from the day-to-day awareness that we have.
yeah, the flow state. And I've always understood that when you don't realize time is passing, you've
Like
been in
now.
flow states. Exactly. I was just looking at it like, whew, that sense of then you're in the zone, then you're really present to this moment. You're not thinking about, oh, what needs to happen next? Oh, what happened yesterday? You're here. And I think that is a quality in whatever way we can do that, whether it's running or playing an instrument or dancing or qigonging, or that it's such a gift if we can find practices that help us remember that state and return to it regularly.
Yeah, and I think it's beautiful also to have these different practices. I know for myself, I practice movement medicine a lot, but I do other types of movements as well. And I really sense the benefit of having different ways of moving. So some of them are more structured, like yoga or like Tai Chi or Qigong, having that, and then having something that's very high in energy, maybe going for a run that requires a lot of physical effort, and then having other things that are much more gentle and much more sensual, maybe, or sensory based, and having all these different ways of accessing the wisdom of the body, where some of them are very precise and some of them are much more amorphous, or much more an invitation into seeing what emerges. Some of them are very functional. I'm doing this to improve my posture, or I'm doing this to help with the strength of my legs, or to support my back or whatever. I think there's something about having all these different pathways into the body that really complements each other. And I'm sure, having a Qigong practice and then having also a movement practice of other kinds, you have some interesting things to share about that as well. How those things hang together, because they're very different, but there's also points of contact, right?
Yeah, I think the point of contact is that language of the body and the ways, like I'm Dutch by background, so my mother tongue is Dutch. I speak English relatively well. I'm learning French and I speak a smattering of German. So there's a few kind of languages that I understand enough of the structure, and I call it the temperament of the language.
Mm.
And it's really, for me, it's so different expressing myself in one or another language. And I think that's similar for the different movement practices.
Mm.
And I think to find ways for our bodies, which are all unique and which have all different needs, to find that intersection where we can challenge the body enough, rest enough, be resourced enough, also be outside enough. Like I could imagine 10 more movement practices, but I don't have time to do them all. And I do want to go for a walk to just breathe in so be realistic in terms of the time you have every day or every week. And then also to just listen to your heart. I mean, what gives you joy? I don't believe in movement practices that you have to do now because it's good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think
and
also
that's
what you said there about, walking is also a movement practice. And sometimes we do it
yeah,
to be outside and we're much more focused on what we're seeing. And sometimes when I walk, it's also like, oh, can I really feel the body as it's moving? Can I feel my feet on the ground, particularly when I'm walking barefoot, for example, or when I'm swimming?
yeah,
Sometimes I just go for a swim, but I can invite in some awareness of how does the body feel in water. I mean, particularly in water, there's something that happens because we came from the waters, in our
yeah,
evolution, we came from the waters in terms of where we came from as babies, our mother's womb, there was water. So for me, it feels like when I'm in water, there's a feeling of like I'm in my natural element, and the body feels different in water than it does from how it feels on land. And can I really pay attention to the sensations of the temperature and the texture on my skin? And how is my body suspended in the water? And where's my leg? Where are my arms? How is it to hold my head out of the water as opposed to, go in? And
yeah,
so any kind
or
of
rest
movement
on,
can be
yeah,
conscious, or
yeah.
it can be just for fun, or it can be for exercise, or yeah, you can run consciously.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's everything we do, we can do with consciousness, or sorry, I just have this sneaky little hair here. With or with less conscious, we can never do it unconsciously, I think. But yeah, I think it's important to ask ourselves why we're doing and choosing this practice and choosing this way to use our time or spend our time. I don't even like these words, to enjoy our time. Yeah.
Be in time.
To be in time and
The
with
time that
time.
we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely,
So
because I
that
feel
as
that takes us also back to where we started. It's like when you say, why are we choosing this particular movement or this particular exercise, or because it takes us back to where we started about what are we embodying when we're doing this kind of movement, right? What quality, for example, am I looking for something that helps me to embody physical strength? Am I doing a practice that helps me to embody more flow? Am I doing something that helps me to embody confidence, or that helps me to embody some kind of relational aspect that, I want to have more connection with other people? So how can I embody that in my movement, in my practice? How can I embody my understanding of myself differently?
yeah, or explore any aspect of yourself, like your willpower or your sensuality or your dreams, like it's a conscious invitation again to let the body speak about and let it help you understand more about this part of yourself or this expression through you or yeah.
It reminds me of Anna Halprin's words. She said something about shaping the invisible, and this kind of
Ah,
idea that when we're moving, when we're dancing, we're giving shape to what's inside, right? Whether we call it our spirit or our soul or our psyche or who we are, and we're bringing it into expression. It's like we're shaping something that we can't. There's not even one word for it, and we can't see it, but we're giving shape to our longing, to our dreams, as you said, our hopes
mhm.
through the body. and then we can see what comes back, right? And we can then, the echo of what comes back becomes a new movement as we respond to that, and as we respond to other people, other beings around us, the trees, the weather, the elements. Yeah. Mm.
I think this is a really beautiful place to wrap it up. What do you think?
That's what I was just thinking. I was just going to ask you, how do you feel in your body?
Yeah. Oh, I feel full of uh, like champagne bubbles. So it's just such a joy to share these, yeah, not often spoken about
Hmm.
topics and like putting words to experiences so that we can, yeah, can express what's going on inside and also, yeah, invite others to also learn the language of their body more and more and more. And like you said earlier, it's a lifelong journey. How exciting is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel excitement by the warmth in my arms, and I can feel my cheeks. Kind of, there's a joy in my cheeks.
Yeah.
And a sort of
Beautiful.
upward energy in my torso that gives me this sense of like, oh, this is so pleasurable to be in
Yeah.
conversation, to spark of each other, to find the, yeah, like you said, to find the words, to find the expressions for some of the things that we do know and we've practiced a lot of the time over these many years, but we've not always spoken about them, and certainly you and I haven't always, had these conversations. So yeah, thank you. Really
Me
joyful.
too. Yeah.
Mm.
And I really feel I've taken a few notes while we were speaking that there are more conversations to be had and more threads to follow. And yeah, I look forward to that.
I was just thinking we should call them the blue door conversations because we've both got those blue doors in the back. The blue door session.
Yep, brilliant. What's behind the blue door? Yeah, that's beautiful.
Stay tuned to find out.
High five. I'm all for it.
Do you want to briefly say something about where people can find you and your work? What channels,
Um,
places
yes.
online?
So I recently changed my Instagram handle to Wild Soul Center. And otherwise, it's probably easier to pop a link underneath the video because my name is hard to spell for people who are not
Okay, on the
Dutch.
screen.
Exactly. But yeah, it's my name, elinekieft.com. That's my website. And there you find all sort of things about Qigong and spirituality and dance things, events and inspiration.
And some beautiful invitations into movement.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Until the next one.
Yes, the next blue door. Wonderful.
Oh, just pause the recording.